Hello, everybody. Welcome to Hessens County. I'm glad that you could join us again today for another TTRPG Talk. This series discusses tabletop role-playing games and related materials, suggests ideas for your own games, and takes a look at some of my own materials. Today, we're going to be starting a new sort of mini-series to kind of go along with my S or D mini-series, where we're going to be taking a look at some major elements and mechanics that you could utilize in your role-playing game when you create it, or maybe, if not specifically in your game, maybe something you could adapt for your own house rules for a pre-existing game system. Specifically, what I'm going to be talking about is character creation. Admittedly, there are role playing games out there where you don't necessarily have to create a character, either because the character is you as a person, or the character is created during the course of play. Or, it could be that your character is instead completely pre-generated character that is just a part of the system that you're just playing through, as opposed to being something you create for yourself, right? Those are all obviously options of like non-player creation sort of TTRPGs. However, of course, many do. There's of course your traditional sort of system where basically there are a lot of lists and systems and things that you kind of just put together, like little pieces that you put together by making your own complete decisions by yourself, or that give you a set list to kind of pick from. So a good example of the set list to pick from would be like playbooks from Powered by the Apocalypse. Having lots of little pieces that you put together, that would be a good example of that would be something like along the lines of Dungeons and Dragons, or Pathfinder, or other systems like that. However, instead, I'd rather like to take a look at is systems that are a bit more interactive, a bit more game-like with the actual character creation. And a lot of those kind of fall under a category that I generally consider to be Lifepath systems. So before I kind of dive any further into that, I do want to kind of define exactly what I mean when I say Lifepath. Basically, a Lifepath system takes a look at the life of the character before they became your character, and uses those events and such to basically kind of create the starting abilities and attributes that your character has. Obvious classic example of this that was actually one of the first role-playing games I ever played is the Traveler system, which has a very famous life path system where your character could actually end up dying, at least in the original version. Your character could end up dying before you actually make it to the end. Now, there are two different kinds of subsets, I would say, when it comes to life path systems. And those would generally be your sort of very strict linear life path system, which again is something along the lines that you see in Traveler, where you're starting off with your character as a youth, and then you go very clearly and deliberately through the different stages of life until you reach adulthood and their general career when they had starting, and then those give them certain abilities, certain connections, certain elements of a past that then turn them into the character that you start at the beginning of the game. The other sort of subset that you could have, other than the linear life path systems, would be a more non-linear life path system, where the abilities and attributes that your character has, you roll up or whatever, you give your character, but they don't necessarily line up with specific linear events as they happen. Instead, you kind of create the events and kind of flesh them out and figure out where they go as you create the character. So you might give your character a specific ability that connects to a job that they had when they were like a teenager. Right. Maybe my character has a skill at identifying plants. Maybe that connects back to when they were 6 and or like much younger than a teenager, and maybe they grew up on their grandfather's farm or explored the countryside a lot or did something like that, which made them really good at identifying plants that would be useful for medicines or farming and other sorts of skills like that, right? So I'm making connections back to my character's past, but I'm not going through in order and deciding exactly how things go. I'm adding the abilities and connecting that to past events, to past characters, to past like NPCs. Several of my games also rely on a system like that. I'll talk about those at some point. But for now, we're going to start by kind of focusing on more linear style systems. So, as an example for our first sort of life path system that we're going to go through, I'm going to actually use the Sherwood game that we just recently reviewed. So, basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the character creation system with you so you can kind of see how a basic life path system might work. Now, why am I mentioned that Traveler was like, is in many ways for lots of people sort of like your quintessential life path. So, why on earth am I going to start with Sherwood? Well, the first thing is that. Traveler does take a while, admittedly, and Sherwood is generally simpler, fewer choices, and the layout of the tables and everything in it are generally more clear than what you might expect in base Traveler. Another reason why I kind of wanted to go through Sherwood is because, of course, Traveler is a science fiction RPG, so I did feel it might be better to start with a more medieval set fantasy game. So it would be a good place to start for people who are more familiar with things like the Dragon game or Pathfinder or things like that. So just give me 1 second to move everything around and we'll be back. So let's go ahead and get this started. We're going to go ahead and start off by giving our character a name. Obviously, in the basics of Sherwood, it recommends that you give your character a name, where they might come from, decide whatever languages they might be able to speak, other than presumably Middle English. And then also you get a basic idea of what the gender expression of your character or sex of your character might be, and then kind of go from there. The rest of it being the actual life path system itself. Instead here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and give my character a name. We'll go ahead and just call them Willem, which I know is not William, but too bad. I'm calling him Willem. The first thing that the system asks us to do is to go ahead and roll attributes for them. So it says that we should roll 2d6 4 times and assign each roll into the character's attributes in order. Then re-roll the lowest of the attributes and switch any 2 of them. We have 4 basic attributes. These attributes are more like types of points that you can kind of spend to do certain activities or basically act as certain styles of hit points. For example, luck is one of those things that you can keep pulling on to modify a roll so that you would succeed or at least not fail too badly. And we're going to start by creating our 4 attributes, as I mentioned. So let's see, we have a 7. For luck, we have rolled another 7. For willpower, we rolled a 4. Oh boy. For wits, we rolled a 10. And then remember, we get to roll 1 more and potentially swap out that willpower if I roll higher. And I got a 10 again. And then I can swap any 2 if I wish. But I think I'm just going to leave things the way they are. So basically, our character has a lot of self-possession and self-control. They have good mental reflexes awareness. They have a high amount of insight. They're about average lucky, and they're average to slightly less than average endurance-wise, which is fine. That's fine. All right. Now, the next thing they like us to do is pick some background abilities. These background abilities basically are kind of marking out like things that come into the fore as a result of like this specific childhood that our character would have had. So for here, they want us to pick 2. There is a list of 7 things. Some of these items we can pick more than once. I'm going to start by picking up a set of background skills, which will mean that we get 2 skills. So because I picked background skills, I get 2 of the skills that are on that list. Let's see, we have athletics, archery, melee, herbalism, performance, writing, silver tongue, streetwise, thievery, or etiquette. I'm going to say that maybe we have silver tongue. Skills in this game do have ranks, so this would mean I'm at silver tongue 1. Let's see, the second skill I would add for background skills will probably be performance would make sense. But I think we're going to go with etiquette. So maybe my character at some point in their childhood got really good at like schmoozing around, or not smooching around, but like got really good at like, you know, talking to people, convincing people of things, that kind of stuff. Maybe not necessarily like con man material, but you know, something along those lines. The second thing I think I would like to get is I would like for my character to have an arcane talent. In this game, characters can have two different types of potential magical abilities. Arcane talents generally are abilities that your character sort of develops or creates over time that are attached to certain classes of things. There's true seeing, where your character is really good at perceiving things that are outside of their normal perception. Clairvoyance, or they can hear things that are happening far away from them, stuff like that. Basically, in order to learn truths that are normally hidden. Illusions, of course, the exact opposite, trying to hide things. Necromancy is, well, I mean, communicating with the dead, and like really powerful necromancers could potentially raise the dead. Pyromancy, that one's probably pretty self-explanatory. Sorcery, however, is a different type of magic that's more built around spells as opposed to just a natural talent that you have. An arcane talent might be something more along the lines of, like, let's say, a fae character having certain abilities or stuff, while sorcery is more like Merlin, where you're actually, like, using magic spells or curses. So that's kind of the difference between the two. I'm going to say that my character has an arcane talent, and the specific arcane talent that they have is going to be geared towards illusion. On the next page, we are going to start a career. So the basic idea is that everything that's been happening up to this point in our character creation is like just like their birth in childhood. And what we're going to start doing now is actually building out the sort of adulthood of our character before they became an outlaw. Because remember the game Sherwood, the basic idea is that your character is an outlaw that's been exiled to the woods, and basically we're kind of building out Willem's backstory here. So here what we'll do is we need to kind of decide what our character's career would be. Just like in Traveler, some of these careers are actually kind of locked behind our attributes. And some of them we can only actually take if we have an attribute above a certain thing, or we have to, or at least we need to roll in order to decide if our character has certain things. Or certain background abilities that we picked up might make it more likely that they will potentially be able to take one of these careers. So, for example, as you can see here with the Guild Trader, if our character had the background ability Aristocrat, meaning that they're from probably a noble family, they get -1 on a roll attempt to try to become a Guild Trader. Another example would be over here. If our character is an aristocrat, they can automatically choose to become a cavalier, but if they're not an aristocrat, we need to roll. If we have luck and wits above 9, we might get a bonus on our roll. If we don't become a courtier, we have to pick something. A courtier, we have to pick something else. I think we're going to try to become a cavalier. That sounds like an interesting thing to try to do. So again, our character does not have the, as I just mentioned, our character does not have the aristocrat background ability. So we're going to have to roll to see if we can become a courtier for a noble or the king or whatever. So again, we need to roll a 2d6. And if we roll an 8 or better, then we can start this career. It also says if we have wits or luck above 9, we get a bonus +2 to our roll. As you can see over here, we do have wits of 10, so we get a +2 bonus to this. So we are going to go ahead and roll. And I rolled a 9, so we can become a cavalier if we wish. So I will go ahead and type that down. Now, because of the career that we picked, we do gain some starting skills to sort of demonstrate our life in court. So we automatically get riding, silver tongue, and melee. So we already have Silver Tongue, so that actually upgrades to a 2. And then we'll go ahead and add Writing 1 and Melee. So we've added our skills to the list, and the next step is the actual sort of like, all right, up here I need to also go ahead and mark down the age of our character. So right now we are 18, right? So what we're going to do is we could just go ahead and start right now with our character. No events have happened. They just became a cavalier. They instantly become an outlaw, right? But we're not going to do that. So instead what we're going to do is says we need to roll 2d6 twice on our table below, choosing one column to roll on and taking the skill or bonus from each roll. We then may roll on the same column twice, so we can, both of our die rolls can either be on the same column or we can pick different columns for each roll. We can repeat this step as many times as we'd like until our character is older than 35. We age 1d6 years for each 2 skills that we roll on the table. However, the older you get, the worse your trouble will be later. If you add a skill. Yeah. Okay, so again, obviously something has to happen to get us kicked out and become a criminal, basically. The only ones where you don't have to choose to become a criminal, you don't have to choose a like something that got you in trouble and that made you become a criminal is sorry, one second. Is the young outlaw, because you just always started out as an outlaw, or the notorious criminal, because again you're already a criminal, so you already had broken the law and were in big trouble. You just went to the woods. So the first one, I guess I'm gonna roll on Knightly Deeds, and I rolled a 3, so that means we get, oh sorry, I did not mean to do that. So we get a +1 to our athletics. And then for our second one, I think I will roll on Courtly Graces, where I rolled a 4, so we get a performance. Alrighty. Now, again, we're 18. We rolled those 2 things. We're done, right? We can choose to roll again, which I think I will do. But again, we got to age our character 1d6 years. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Our character aged 4 years, so that means our character is now 22 instead of 18. And again, I get to roll twice. I'm just going to roll twice on the Secrets of the Great Houses just to see how that ends up turning out to be. And we have a 6 and a 2. So 6 means we add 1 more to Silver Tongue, so we now have a Silver Tongue of 3. The 2 means we get 1 in Thievery. So we ended up getting into a bunch of skullduggery, apparently, in the years of our life between the ages of 18 and 22. And I think I'm going to stop there. I don't want to get too high up because I don't want to make the trouble that my character is going to experience too badly later. So we are going to move on to the next stage of our character creation and figure out what that trouble is over here. So again, it says here if we started off as a young outlaw or a notorious criminal, we do not need to know what their trouble is because we already know what their problem is. So we get to roll 1d6. We have to figure out what trouble our character had. Because we are only 22, we do not add any bonuses to this. If I had gone again and let's say if I had rolled again on the skills tables and let's say made my character 26, then I would have had to add 2 to our roll. So hopefully it won't be something too high. So here we go. I rolled a 3, which means we were blamed for an unfortunate death. It says someone died and you were blamed for their death, whether this was fair or not. So we need to name the person who died and the person who swore vengeance against us. I'm going to say the person who died was an abbess. So, as for the person who is Abbess Teofleur she, her. And then the person who is seeking vengeance would be Bishop Philippe de Guerre. And let's say, let's add a little extra information. Let's say that Abbess Toffler, who died, maybe she was helping me in one of my skullduggery missions, while Bishop Philippe de Guerre, maybe he was the person that Tiofleur was helping me investigate, and was also her friend. And the fact that Tiofleur was helping was his secret. So basically, she was helping me investigate. Tiofleur was helping me investigate Philippe de Guerre, maybe for like malfeasance or something, or like maybe secrets that the family that I work for, the noble family I work for, was trying to figure out. And so she was helping me, and secretly, and she ended up getting maybe killed by one of the guards or something because the mission went bad, and my character got blamed for it because my character was there and got caught. So they assumed that my character, that Willem, was involved in killing her, even though she wasn't. And and Philippe de Guerre didn't know about the fact that Tiofleur was helping me investigate him, so it just ended up becoming a big giant mess. So connections. So based on that, I would say probably a good connection to have might be my former patron. So, yeah, it would make sense for this person to be pretty powerful. So maybe Duke Richard of Richmond. Duke Richard of Richmond. Let's make that something else. Let's make them Duke Edward of Richmond. Yeah, that would be much better. And then, so he's my former patron. He probably knows the truth about what happened, or maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But he was the former patron that I probably worked for. He was probably the reason why I was doing the investigating, but maybe he doesn't necessarily know whether or not I was responsible for the death of Tiofleur. But either way, he knows I got caught, and that Philippe de Guerre is still on the loose, so that did not come out as I intended. Another connection, let's make them a dependent. Maybe I have a child who is living with a distant family. Let's see what should we name them. Maybe well, I mean, this is a Robin Hood game, so why not Marion? There we go. All right. And then that's basically it, right? Any other steps from here on out would require working with the whole group. So, like I mentioned, this is pretty straightforward and simpler character creation system to what you might normally expect in a, let's say, in comparison to a Lifepath from Traveler, which has a lot more rolling and a lot more steps involved. But yeah, this is kind of the basics of how a life path would work. Usually you start off by creating a base sort of set of attributes here, and maybe a couple base abilities, and then you roll a lot from there just to see how things go. So thank you all for joining me again today. Today again, this was the Lifepath system for Sherwood. I certainly recommend that you check it out. Links to the game can be found down below, along with somewhere in the video there would have been a card for the the TTRPG Talk short that I created previously, or of course you can find a link to that also in the description down below. I hope you'll join us again next time for the next time that we take a look at a Lifepath system, and don't forget to rate your itch purchases. If you would like to show your support for this channel or for the Hessens County blog, in the description down below you will find links to the channel coffee and also the itch store. Please feel free to take a look, and thank you for your support.